Welcome to Off the Wire, the podcast that helps you curb your cybersecurity risk and tackle technology challenges. I'm Tanner and I'm joined by Anthony. We're two IT executives with 35 years of experience. Let's start the show. Welcome back to an episode of Off the Wire. It's a new year and everyone's got a new budget. And so Anthony and I thought it might be kind of an interesting conversation to talk about hardware. Now, we wouldn't be proper tech people if we didn't get excited when we purchased a new piece of hardware. Everyone loves unwrapping that initial thing when they get it in, that new piece of cool tech. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of our philosophy on hardware and their life cycles, and then some new hardware we've been trying out that we think you might want to as well. But before we jump in, if you're not subscribed to our podcast, please subscribe on whatever platform you're either listening to us or watching now. If you're on YouTube, make sure you click the bell so you'll be notified of all of our latest episodes. If you find value in our discussion today, please just reach out to a friend, a colleague, someone that you think would also find value, and just share the podcast with them. And if you get a chance, leave us a review. So let's just go ahead and jump in, Anthony. Me and you had a good discussion kind of pre-show talking about our philosophies around hardware. And for those that haven't heard us, I guess, disagree enough, there'll be a few disagreements as we go through. But maybe just start with like kind of basic off the shelf stuff like desktops, laptops. What's your philosophy on that? And like, what do you guys buy? And, what's your history, I guess, from that?
Yeah, before I get started, I'll say this. I do think that IT hardware is kind of like with vehicles. It's like, are you a Chevy man, a Ford man, or even a Toyota person? And everyone's got their make and model that they think's best across the board. But I feel that I'm probably right on this more so than others. Now, we'll say I will say this: just keep an open mind with whatever hardware, and some things they may be good for several years, and they may go downhill later on. And we've tried several things. When I first got the Fort County, I was doing cybersecurity, and we weren't buying hardware, and plus I worked for HP, so everything we got issued to us was an HP product. And anyways, got to Fort County, and I still had that whole HP thing in me, and we bought like their highest end laptops to try those out. They were ZBooks. They were very expensive. And we bought two of them, and honestly, they were turds. One had a motherboard failure, and another one, it goes through batteries like every year and a half at least. And the bad part is just with all these modern laptops is they try to make them thin for the most part. And if you have an issue with your battery, it can cause the motherboard to fail or your keyboard and mouse not to work. It just causes a lot of issues.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried some Dell laptops, didn't really have good success with those. We tried HPs, didn't have good success with those. We had some ThinkPad Lenovo's. We had some other Lenovo's that we tried, but the ThinkPads were the only ones that we consistently did not have issues. I don't think we've had one issue with one ThinkPad so far, except for, and we can go into this later, but basically just an individual that works in the field and is very rough on anything. So, but that was just where it was physically just, beat up. So we were consistently buying the ThinkPad Lenovo's, and for desktops, I prefer to honestly buy American company. It's just we've had so many issues that I've really kind of just stuck with those. But for the desktops, we find the Dells have been very reliable with desktops, so we get those. And we were very hesitant to do this, but we have in the past couple years moved over to the micro form factor. Just a little hesitant, didn't think they'd be as reliable. We've had good success with them. I know that Tanner, we were talking, and you said that you did not. You care to share that insight?
Yeah, we tried the micros, and I guess we haven't tried a newer one. So the latest version, I think, was trying to think like the 7500. So it's been a few years back, but we tried several generations and it just didn't really care for them. I think part of it was we were trying to use them for more than what they really were kind of designed for. We were trying to use them as like kind of a do-all, and I think they're really made, or at least in our case, it seemed like they were made for a little lighter use. And then we had some power supplies fail in them. For those that may not be aware, the Dell Micros, they are so small they don't have a power supply built in. So having that power brick, I don't know why. They're not expensive. I think we're replacing them for like $15, but still it would just seem to be that we'd have those go bad. And I don't know if it's like heat related or just what, but we didn't have the best luck with them. I will say, like, I guess this is maybe a product of growing up in like the late 90s and then the early 2000s, but As a kid, I wanted an IBM laptop so bad. I remember the little red button. It had the trackpad plus the red button. I just thought it was the coolest thing. My parents got me a Dell when I went to college, and it was great. I was happy for it, but if I could have picked out anything, I wanted the IBM. That was before they got bought out, but
Yeah.
um, yeah, we're a big Dell shop. We use mostly Dell, whether that's laptops or PCs. We kind of have about a 4-year rotation, and our philosophy, we've kind of gone back and forth. I know a lot of people are moving to the laptop docking station, and while I like that in a lot of ways, we had a little bit of some issues early on with some laptops overheating with the lid closed because of the way they were designed. They just weren't getting the airflow out. But we still have quite a few people who they're kind of religious about that. They love that laptop docking station. So we have a few of those, maybe 20%. And 80% is typically either they just have a PC by itself, or they'll have a PC and then they have a laptop that they take home. And I know we were talking about that does create extra devices. So that's kind of a downside of that. If you've got people that aren't bringing in their laptops, then that can be a potential downside. I know we're going to talk about rugged here in a second, but that's kind of I guess, our general philosophy on it.
Yeah, the multiple devices, that's one where I kinda put my foot down. When I got to Fort County, it wasn't a whole lot of people, but we did have several people. I would say maybe like 6 that had dual devices, like they'd have a desktop and a laptop, but every single one of them did not bring in their stuff very frequently. And when we started, monitoring our metrics for our vulnerability scans and, like the high and criticals, like those ones would pop up on the list. And just because they weren't bringing them in or weren't leaving them powered on. And I told initially what to try to solve it, we bought a new product that could patch even if it was remotely and we could even connect to it remotely. But I told everyone that had that, I was like, "You need to leave that laptop on, like, 24/7 at the house," which I guess leaving it on kinda leaves it open, to stuff to happen, but that was the only way we could get it updated. We tried that, it helped a little bit, but it still didn't solve the issue, and so we just put a hard stance, and where we try to just have a little bit of balance, and we're gonna talk about iPads, but we would just offer them, like an iPad with a nice keyboard mouse combo for that, and just for one individual, high level individual, I'm not gonna say who at our company, but we basically just took the laptop and wiped it and made a personal computer because they really weren't using it for work a whole lot. And anyways, that was kind of our last one. And anyway, we've got a hard stance on that, and I really don't want to let that cat back out of that bag. I'm curious though, as far as specs, like what are you guys getting for your typical end user, Tanner?
Yeah, obviously that's changed over the years. I remember whenever I first got there. Well, first Windows couldn't even do more than I think it was like 3.125 or something like that gigs because it was 32-bit. But once we got to the 64-bit OSs, we kind of started at 8, and that was kind of our magic number. But in probably like the last 5-ish to 7 years, we've kind of went to 16 for RAM. That's been honestly the big thing. The CPUs are definitely important. We usually go i5s. It's kind of the sweet spot. Um, but we've seen more, I guess, RAM as being like a constraint, I guess, over the years. So we started with, or we've been doing 16 for quite a while. And one thing we are seeing though, and we are, it's a combination as people get new desktops. We're obviously giving them Windows 11. We're also upgrading some folks to Windows 11, and we have seen a smattering of issues with only 16 in some Windows 11 instances. I don't know if it's just the way they're using their computer or if Windows 11 has just got a little more resource heavy than 10. So we have upgraded actually, I don't know, probably a half a dozen to a dozen folks to 32 gig. And that's kind of like the basic, I would say. We used to, just recently, we switched to 512 gig SSDs is kind of our base standard. It was 256. And we just ran into issues, especially when we went to OneDrive. We were syncing OneDrive locally. And for those that I use in OneDrive, syncing locally is something I would highly recommend. Performance seems to be a lot better with files. But the downside of that is, of course, you're filling up the local hard drive. And then if you have a computer like a conference room where people are logging in multiple times, then obviously that's going to fill that up. So we're kind of swapping to 512 on that. And then that's kind of the basic, I would say. And then there are certain positions that, our IT staff, GIS staff, our system operations, where they're running either way more monitors or in a lot of cases, just a lot more applications up at the same time where we'll kind of make an exception and go a little larger.
For us, it's basically the same. Now you got me a little paranoid. We just ordered typically at the beginning of the year, we'll order 1 laptop before we go all in, and we try to get a standard type laptop, and anyways, we got the Lenovo for this year, and we got 16 gig as the base build, so now you got me a little paranoid on maybe we need to up it. So, I guess before we order the rest of them, I'll definitely see what they're kinda sitting at when they're using it, and 512, the NVMe drives, and pretty much everything you get now has NVMe, but, like, back when that was optional, like, that really NVMe changed the game. I mean, they people talk about SSDs. I know SSDs over spinning disk was a huge jump, but I also think going from SSDs to NVMe was a pretty big jump as well. Not quite as much, but it definitely plays a difference. So, yeah, we typically get i5s. I do try to ensure that when we buy our stuff that it is a current generation i5. A lot of times, if you're not careful, you can get, a CPU that's already 2 generations old. As long as we're keeping them, we need to make sure we're getting the current generation CPU. But typically, yeah, for IT, we do i7s and 32 gig of RAM. And for engineering, anyone with GIS, we did get our first Beefcake micro server PC. So I don't know really with the size, but I guess a normal micro form factor is like a 1U in height. I know they're real small. Um, but we got these Beefcake ones that it's got quad, like between display and HDMI ports. And it's probably like a 2 or a 3U, but it's still the same width. It's anyways, they are heavy duty. We'll see how those go. They were not cheap, but anyways, Dell does make a pretty substantial micro form factor for the people that need it. But yeah, anyone using GIS, like they need a workhorse for that. And there's probably a few exceptions, like anyone like the people that do marketing, we try to make sure they got good graphics card and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's 2 standard builds is what we're getting. It's either the i5 and 16 gig or the i7 and 32 gig, and we do 512 across the board. Because just like you, when we rolled out OneDrive, like we had a bunch that had 256 gig, and we had a lot of issues just keeping it to that level.
Do you guys run any Macs? That's something that we've had a few of in our environment. I was just curious what you guys were doing there.
I try to keep that to a minimum. We've had marketing folks ask for that. I don't. I'll build them or buy them the most beefcake Windows PC, but like I really just don't want to support it. We do have to have it. Our GIS programmer, he has a Mac, and occasionally we may need it for an iPad or something like that to do something. But just because where he does development in iOS, like he has that device, but we try to stay away from it, honestly.
Yeah, we have a couple. We have basically a guy that does like social media, does a lot of audio editing, and we've let him have a Mac. But he did have a laptop and then an iMac, but he's just going to do like kind of a docking station MacBook Pro now, which is really nice. But we have used them some in IT. We actually have several. I think a lot of it is just kind of that we talked about earlier, just new hardware and just different hardware. It's just it's as techie people, we like that kind of thing. One thing that I have heard in the past, and obviously I don't know if this would be something that would happen in the future, but they had a guy, he came from medical field and they had a little bit of a mix and they actually got hit with a virus. This is, probably 10 years ago, maybe even more. But the one cool thing was it affected like all the Windows PCs. So their Macs were kind of unscathed and they were able to use them to kind of recover from that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that would actually happen in today's world, but I always kind of make that justification a little bit. I was like, well, if Windows PCs get compromised, we got these Macs sitting here that may not be compromised. We can use to recover. So I don't know if that'll.
That whole CrowdStrike debacle.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I guess maybe that's proved itself a little more recently. Rugged machines. I know for us, obviously, we have people that work in the field. I know there's a lot of industries where that's not the case, but in our industry, obviously, there's people that work in the field and they obviously need a more rugged machine. So we've been typically using the Dell Rugged for the last few years. We have used the Panasonic. We do give them the option of the Panasonic, but I will say I do prefer the Dell response if there are issues. And kind of the thing with rugged laptops is there are going to be some issues. I mean, they just get used hard. So that is more important, I think, than just like the standard desktop. Panasonics, it just seems like we have to send them in when they break, and it seems like they're out of commission 2 or 3 weeks. And kinda to your point where you're kinda encouraging people to use laptops and docking stations, if you're out of a laptop for 2 or 3 weeks, I mean, you're kinda, sitting on your hands, so, we only have a few tough books, but I will say tough books, without a shadow of a doubt, to me, are the toughest laptop you can buy. If they do break, it's not very often, but, like, we had one riding around in a truck bin for, gosh, a month, I think, and it didn't have any finish left on the laptop, but it was still you charge it up, it booted right back up. But the Dells, they seem to be a little bit better. They're a little more configurable, which I like. It seems like we can really get them customized to the person and their job role. And but like on you guys, do you guys? I know you guys use regular machines. Are you guys using Dell or Panasonic or something like that?
So I probably should have given Panasonic another look, but I used them when I was at Buckeye REC. And the thing I hated about them is, we're spending top dollar for this laptop, and they were always super slow. And if you look, and maybe they fix this now, but typically, like if you buy a brand new Toughbook, like you're going to get old, antiquated hardware as the guts. Like it'll have a couple generation old processor, and I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if they still use SSDs instead of NVMe. Maybe they've resolved that. I think Dells do a much better job as far as putting more modern guts in them. I do think the Toughbooks are a little more rugged than the Dells. So I honestly I tried to cheap out on this and it bit us in the butt. So we went and bought the Lenovo ThinkPads, and just where they get mounted in the vehicles where, that thing's like a vice putting it in there. It just ate through those laptops. So we did do that. And one thing, this was something I should have took note of and I didn't, but just the brightness, the nit level on those Dell Ruggeds is so much better. And it's not an issue for a person if they're working in the vehicle, but if you take a regular laptop outside, you're not gonna be able to hardly see that thing. And the Dell is just where they have a much higher nit that it made it much more usable for basically our substation techs.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize that how vibration can play a role in those things. And like the Panasonics, they look beefier, like it's more drop protection, and that is part of it, of course, and water and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the ruggedness of a laptop is actually vibration because, to your point, you're mounting it rigid, and once you mount it rigid in a vehicle, I mean, you think as you get on the road, every railroad track, pothole, everything you hit, I mean, that's an impact to that laptop, and that's a big reason why they cost so much is basically them shielding the laptop from that. So let's talk monitors a little bit. I know we have a little bit different philosophy on monitors. For us, we have really, and I know we're going to talk about some brand new kind of philosophy on monitors here in our new hardware section or interesting hardware section. But for us, it's really been over the years two monitor setup for most people, other than maybe a few people that just use a computer very just transiently, just like about 10, 15 minutes a day. But recently, I guess in the last 5 to 7 years, we started adding some three monitor setups. And then we have actually quite a few, maybe like 10, 15% of four monitor setups, especially for our frontline staff that are talking to people on the phone so that they can have more things up so they're not having to hunt for stuff. Obviously, that requires some video card, an additional video card, typically over the internal video card. But I know you guys, for us, it's all 24s pretty much. You guys maybe have a little bit different philosophy on that.
Yeah. So going back to my old company at HP, I worked from home and I had dual 24s, and this is going back 15, 16 years ago where that really wasn't super common. And even before that at Buckeye REC, like for the most part, we had people with dual monitors. And when I got to Fort County, almost everybody except for IT had single monitors. And I was like, this is insane. Like, if you factor in what you pay an individual and also like their benefits and everything, it's worth it to spend the extra $200 or whatever it is, even if it's $300 for an extra monitor just to get a little more efficiency out of folks. So I made like the standard that, everyone gets at least dual 24-inch monitors. We had just a few exceptions. We had a couple spaces where they just couldn't fit dual monitors, and we had two individuals and one just retired that just didn't want two monitors. So for the most part, everyone's got that dual 27s if they can fit it. Anything over on dual monitors, I think anything over 27s is a little big for the desk and stuff like that. Like our GIS folks, we've tried to get them 27s and they really appreciate it. I do have a funny story though. When we were rolling it out, everyone's like, "Oh," everyone loved Anthony because he was getting dual monitors for everyone. We had this one staking technician. He went from, like, I don't even know what they were, maybe 19s at or 119 to dual 27s, and, like, he was grinning ear to ear, and after, like, 2 days of using it, he's like, "Man, those things are great." He's like, "But is there anything you can do to make the text less fuzzy?" I was like, "Are you serious?" And he's like, "Yeah, the text is all fuzzy." I'm like, "I can't." I said, "I can give you the name of a good eye doctor. Go get some glasses." I was anyways, just po I mean, I went and checked the setup, and it was perfectly crystal clear. Just one of those people that refuse to wear eyeglasses, so I don't even know how he's working off a single night knee.
Yeah, monitors are kind of a funny thing, actually more really than anything else. I guess because the desktop doesn't really show what speed or what components are inside of it, if that makes sense. But we've talked about this a lot, and I think it's monitors are one of the especially one of the first things where if someone gets a little bit bigger one, oh boy, does that word travel fast. I mean, it is around the office and like, we always joke when we're doing meetings between districts that like the meetings already happened before we got there if we meet at one first because they've already told everybody. But that is the way it is. I mean, if one person gets them on a new monitor, new size, maybe it's a thinner bezel. I remember when the thin bezels really came out and it's like, hey, you got any more of those monitors? Yeah, that's interesting. And I think which we're going to talk about some newer monitors we're trying out too. I think that's probably getting ready to change again. What about like mobile devices? So I know rugged laptops obviously was kind of king of the crop whenever I got to in the industry, and now a lot of things have gone to iPads. Just gone to or tablets for that matter, not necessarily just iPads. Do you guys use iPads quite a bit, and then do you use them in the field, in the office, and then kind of what's your philosophy on like who you purchased and which models you purchased, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we're heavy iPad users. I mean, we're just a straight Apple shop. We have a in-house developer, and he's developed several applications. And not that it's too hard to do both, but we just honestly the Apple devices, like them or hate them, they are reliable. You can't really argue that. So yeah, we probably got more iPads than we have people when you count our board of directors. So we have probably over 100 iPads that we support. In general, we for a typical user, anyone that's on call, they get an iPad and they get it with cellular service. And something we just started is letting them choose their carrier. But for the most part, we get the latest generation iPad. We do have a few folks to where we will get them a iPad Pro, and that's really for our stakers. They can now we've got some new software where they can do a lot of their staking in the field on an iPad, and they tie in a GPS unit to that iPad to get the points. But one thing, we were out training with them, and they had just a regular iPad. You really couldn't. It was just like the regular laptops, the regular iPads. The nit value is really low, and it was very difficult to see. And I mean, they're literally outside their vehicle, trying to do that. So we bought them the 11-inch, the small iPad Pros, and they've got, I think it's like double the net value, and it made a huge difference on the visibility. So we're doing that. We do have a few people to where we get I don't know if it's a 13 or a 13.2, the iPad Pros, and I really don't care getting those unless it's like a power user, like our VP of operations, he's constantly working from his iPad. Even when he's on his computer, he has his iPad up with like our maps with our outages and stuff like that. For someone that uses it constantly, I have no issue buying them a iPad Pro. So, he gets one. We've got some senior leadership that gets that, and then also our GIS programmer where he's developing and stuff like that. We want to get him a good device to be building on. So that's kind of our general consensus. As far as rotation, we haven't had a reason to sway from this, but we replace iPads on their 5th year. Typically, we find that the battery is starting to degrade on the 5th year, so that's our rotation, and honestly, that matches our desktops and laptops. We do a 5-year rotation on those. I know we'll go into phones, but just because I'm talking about rotation, we do a 5-year rotation on those, but honestly, they don't make it. But that's what we're keeping.
We kind of, I don't know. We have we're gonna get into phones here in a sec, but iPad wise, we kind of do 4 years, same as desktops. We have pretty much most of our field iPads all have LTE. We kind of got tired of like swapping back and forth between people. It's like, oh, Joe's going to do service orders this week, so he needs LTE, and so we got to put his on and then take someone else's off. It was just much easier, honestly. And we ought to do a whole episode on that where a lot of people like they actually waste more money trying to save money. I don't know how we need to like that should definitely be like an episode topic, but when you take like someone and you have them work for an hour swapping something once a week, I mean, there's your whole cost year, you know.
Yeah.
So and I know I hear that about that a lot, but with iPads, it's mainly the iPad that we use. We do have a couple iPad Pros, not many, a few with the Apple keyboard, which I highly recommend, especially the one that will allow you to tilt the iPad. But for the bigger ones, we have a couple iPad Pros as well. But we started using the iPad Air. They have the 13-inch variety of the iPad Air now, and it's been pretty good, and it's quite a bit cheaper than the Pro. So we've been using that. The Apple keyboard, highly, highly recommend. And to your point, it's pretty variable. I think this is one of those things where flexibility is kind of king. You got someone who uses a laptop, like I know there's people that prefer a laptop that won't even have an iPad, and then there's people that have a laptop but they needed an iPad, and so we just get them maybe the smaller one. And then there's kind of those people that are going to replace an iPad or replace a laptop with an iPad. We sometimes get them the bigger one. I don't see if you have a laptop, I don't see the 13-inch iPad just seems like it's redundant a little bit. You don't get a lot of like, weight savings or size savings or anything like that. So kind of moving on into phones, you kind of open the door here. We do it a little bit different. We don't have a set thing. We average about 3 years. Some people we rotate a little quicker, and some people we rotate a little slower. It just depends. A lot of times is how long the device is going to last, battery life, things like that. We will not force anybody to rotate. So if someone, we were talking about vehicles earlier. I know some people get really attached to something, a vehicle or a piece of hardware. They just want to keep it forever. So we got a few older iPhones roaming around out there. As long, our only stipulation on that is that they can stay up to the latest release. So as long as they can stay up on the latest security updates, and someone wants to keep it because they love it and the battery's still working good, we're not going to stand in their way. We don't do a lot of stipends. I know some companies do stipends. I think you guys maybe do that, and we do mainly. We just go ahead and pay for it. Our philosophy is we don't, if we're trying to get a hold of someone like on call or otherwise, we don't want them to, we want the responsibility of whether or not we can reach them on us versus them if they don't pay their bill and we can't reach them, and it's kind of an emergency or something like that. So we do have a few people in stipends. We'll allow that, but just not a lot of people take it up because they don't want the cost of replacing their own hardware, that kind of thing. But what about you guys? Like, are you guys? I know. Oh, carrier. Let me stop back here. Carriers. It's a mix. Mostly Verizon. Probably 80% Verizon. They just had the best coverage in our area. Then probably, actually, I take that back. Maybe 70%. Then probably about 20% a regional carrier called Carolina West. And then right now we've started swapping some phones to FirstNet, and had pretty good luck with that. So kind of a mix. I know you guys might be the same.
Are you guys using a private network for all your carriers or some of them? How does that work for you guys?
We do for any device that's going to be, I guess, accessing a particular service that's we want to be more restrictive about, if that makes sense. So if we have like our service order system, and then we do have a couple with some Android tablets accessing our subsidiary. They have a delivery system that they access for where we're going to like limit it. We only want these things to, touch those things. Then we will. If it's just a phone, we don't. I don't think. I mean, there might be a few that we have, but I don't think we go through that with every single one because mainly they're checking email and browsing the web, and it literally wouldn't matter if they're on our own part of the Verizon network for that or not because they're hitting Microsoft servers, or generic web servers. So, but iPads we do.
Our rule of thumb is if you are on call, you get an iPad with cellular service. We do have a few people where we get them iPads. We just don't get the cellular service with it. But for the phones, I'm hoping our CEO doesn't listen to this episode because probably twice a year he asks me, maybe we should start getting phones for all the employees. And I just really don't want to deal with the headache. I think they're more of a headache than iPads to maintain because I just think they have more issues. Not that they're reliable, but I think people break them and lose them more frequently. So basically, the only people that get a phone is kind of like the executive leadership, and then a few key personnel, we get phones. So I think we've got 8 or 9 company phones issued. Everyone else gets a $30 stipend. This is something I don't know if it's just us or not, but, like, even out of the people that have company phones, a lot of them still have a personal phone, like, they just don't trust IT at all. Like, I don't know, it's just something, like, I feel like they've just inherited before I got there, because 'cause I'm like, You don't really need to have a second phone." Anyways, but that's just something they're gonna do, and I kinda feel like that's the way our regular employees are, because 'cause I've talked to a few people, would you rather, continue to get the stipend or not? And our folks would rather have the stipend. So for the most part, I'm sure there's some out there. Now, I guess if we were buying everyone, brand new iPhones every couple years, that might change the tune. I'm not really sure. But anyway, that's something like I've dealt with managing phones at Buckeye. We paid for everyone's phone. And I just remember it being quite the headache. And if I can avoid it. And that's where I think Duo helps us out, for people they have phones, depending on if they wanna use certain applications from us or get on our stuff, we can verify that they, have the PIN or even biometrics, and it's something that can be updated, so that's one of the things we do to kinda guard ourselves against BYOD.
I hope you don't mind. I just sent an email to your general manager telling him about this episode. So said buy all the smartphones. It works out great. No, it mostly does. Obviously, there is more. I'll tell a kind of a funny story. I'm obviously not going to use a name just in case, but there was a particular person when I first, I don't know, about 10, 12 years ago, when I was kind of got into mobile device setup and stuff, where every 2 years there was a miraculous accident that happened to their phone. It was like, oh no, it got ran over by a car. Oh no, it fell down the stairs. There was always something. I was like, okay. But yeah, people are keen. Whatever system you put in place, if they like it, they will work inside of it to their advantage. What about like the stuff that I know we've talked about replacing things, and replacing things kind of leads to having old surplus equipment. Do you guys have like a system that you do to kind of work through your older iPads, older phones? I don't know. In 5 years, you might not have much less than much, just a bunch of paperweights at that point. But do you guys like donate those? What do you do with those the stuff that piles up?
We do donate a few, but for the most part, what we do is we'll offer it to employees to buy at the recycle rate price. We've tried doing an auction, and honestly, like, I think that's the most fair thing, but it's just a little more to handle, and so I try to offer it to the employees that had it first, which not ideal to some people, and then, I try to make sure that the other folks get an opportunity. We've been doing it so long that, early on, everyone wanted to buy their own iPad, but we've, went through the rotation a couple times, and now some people, like, they don't care to buy it, even, if it's only 40 or $60. So we usually have enough to we always run out, but we get to offer it to quite a few other folks.
Yeah, we about 5 years ago actually started when we moved into our new building. We had a big auction, bunch of stuff we just didn't want to move, and that kind of led into us just continuing to do that. If any of the applications team, part of our IT team at work, if any of them are listening, hopefully they are. I'd give them a huge shout out. They actually built kind of a kind of a little pseudo eBay for us. We can add photos on the device. We had the serial numbers, and then people can bid on things. They can put in max bids. If someone tries to snipe someone at the last minute, it will, it'll extend the auction. We run an auction for about a week. We started on a Friday. We end it the next Friday. We usually do it kind of prior to Christmas. A lot of people buy like iPads for their grandkids or something like that. So, and it's worked out really, really well. It's some good deals, but also, I mean, some devices, we'll get, the premium that really they deserve. And what we do is we donate every bit of the money to our members foundation. And our members foundation is just a nonprofit that will basically gives money to either community grants or to members as assistance on their electric bill. So it all works out in the end. You know, yeah, there's some, I guess, hassle to it, but there's some part of it we have to do anyway with like assets. You have to remove them from your accounting. But I think, being able to do that, people being able to get something was really, really nice. And then also that donation is super nice. So I think it's worth the hassle to do that. So if anyone's listening and wants to know how to set that up, just reach out to us. So talking about some interesting hardware, I know we don't always, sometimes in the hardware game, you're kind of thinking about just replacement of what you have, right? You know, you got like laptops and desktops and all that stuff, but sometimes you get to buy something brand new. It's not completely, maybe it's a new laptop model, but it may be something piece of technology that's not even related to a normal laptop or desktop. Have you guys got anything that you've been purchasing recently that you feel like our listeners or viewers might need to look into?
I don't know that I want to share one thing. I guess I will. Ever since the docking stations went over to the USB-C connection, we've early on for the first few years we had just countless issues. We tried, we tried Lenovo's, we tried Dell, we tried HP, whatever brand or laptop that we got, and just the connection seemed to be just a constant issue. And we by chance got a Dell Universal Docking Station, a D6000. I don't know what they run now, but in the past they've been about $160. Hands down, the best docking station ever. They've been making them for years. I hope they don't ever quit because we have hardly any issues out of those. Even with the connection, it's usually rock solid. So we've been buying those. It doesn't. I mean, we typically get Lenovo's and they work just fine with every brand that we've ever put it against. So hopefully they don't. If they stop making those, I don't know what we're gonna do because we just had constant issues with docking stations. Another thing I think people will be interested in is Teams meeting room, conference room, cameras and speakers and microphones. They're a few years old at this point, but we have the Poly Studios. We have several X50s. They're good for like a small to medium sized room. And like we've got a room that will sit probably about 40 people and it does well up to that. And we've got a very large training room that we can fit well over 100 folks in it. And we use the X70 for that. Don't quote me on this, but I think the X50s run about 1500 and the X70s, they're about 3000. And they'll tie into your audio system as well. So they've got some more functionality. They've got really nice cameras, zoom in. The best part about them is really just the audio. I think you told me this. I think it's called like narrowband audio where it focuses in on the speaker. I don't know what kind of magic they're doing, but that really works well. It's surprising how well it works, especially in a large room. And I know there's newer stuff out there, and I've heard a lot of good things about some other providers, but we've had good luck with those, and they seem to be pretty nice.
Yeah, we've actually been trying a new kind of conference room. I get to your point with the advent of Microsoft Teams and really, and especially in our space, and I would really honestly say small medium businesses in general. Teams just seems to be the de facto, mainly because you're already getting it, usually as part of your other licensing. But we've been trying some of the Neat Bar Pros. They're very similar system. A bar has a speaker, microphone array, multiple cameras that goes on the wall, has a little pad, which I really like, that sits on the table and allows you to kind of join the room and do some of the other functionality. We just started using them. Really been really happy with them so far. We actually been replacing some older units, some Logitech room devices that we really didn't have good luck out of. They would consistently just have to be worked on. So far so good. I really like them. They're really designed well, and I can really appreciate when something's designed so that like the person having to work on it, it's easier for them. So when the bracket comes off, it can kind of tilt without the whole speaker coming off so that you can get to all the plugs. But and then it goes back in and kind of hides all that. It's really nice. But we're also looking at their Neat Board product. Basically, it's the same kind of Neat bar. It's just added into a touch screen, and they have different sizes, 55, 65. But that you can get it with like kind of a rolling cart, which we are thinking might be really, really useful. We can kind of move it from room to room, obviously leave it in a big conference room, but as there's other conference rooms that maybe need it, you can just kind of roll it down the hall and set it up anywhere. So a little more flexibility there. And then those are, they're pretty pricey. They're somewhere in the like, 3 to 5K range. But for me, with those rooms, it's all about ease of use and it's all about how often we have to visit it. So if we don't have to visit it very often, like it is worth the extra cost. Again, to my point earlier, some people by saving money will actually cost themselves more money. So you got a story to share on that?
Well, that's 100% the case. I tried countless between $2 and $800 devices, and every single one, even 1,000. As a matter of fact, we tried the Owl, and it seemed like a cool concept, but the microphone is not very good. If you use a speaker system on it, it's horrible. Anyways, I can't remember the other brands, but I think we got like a Jabra. I think we tried some Logitech stuff, but that's one of those things where I think you gotta spend a little money to get something that's of any count. So don't do like I did.
Yeah, I will say we've used a couple of these, so not extensively, but if you have a smaller conference room, it's something you'd probably have 5 people in, and you already have a PC there. We have a couple conference rooms where we have PCs already, like our IT conference room, so that we're not having to, like, bring something into the conference room all the time. We have used the Logitech Meetup and Meetup 2. They're about that $1,000 range. I will 100% tell you they are not as good as the more expensive models, but the nice thing is they're just an add-on to a PC. So what happens when you have a conference room with a PC and you put like a neat bar in there, you get this weird, like, you got to change inputs scenario where it's like the neat bar is on HDMI 1, the PC is on HDMI 2. And over my career with conference rooms, my philosophy is make it where it uses a cable. I know a lot of people love wireless solutions, but when people understand cable plugged in work, cable unplugged not work. It's very simple, and don't make them change inputs. If they have to change inputs, you're going to have a lot more support. So in those rooms where we just have the PC, we just want one input, we'll use those, but that's just a couple cases. The bars we have tried, even the Logitech rooms are way better. So highly recommend. I heard good things on Poly too. Um, Speaking of docking stations, I just saw that the D6000 is out of stock on Dell's website. So I don't know. Our listeners are already at it, I guess. No, I'm kidding. But speaking of docking stations, Dell has some new monitors that we have been trying. We didn't initially get these for that capability, but their new monitors have docking stations built in. They call them hub monitors. So you can have basically USB-C, it'll do 90 watts out. So that's most laptops. And they can KVM, which is kind of nice. So if you have like a desktop and a laptop, you can plug your laptop in, share your mouse and keyboard and Ethernet into that, and vice versa into a desktop on another input. We've been using the 43 inch, and I know someone's out there probably thinking, 43 inches, that is crazy. But what we have been doing is kind of replacing a quad setup of monitors with the one monitor. And they have a piece of software that lets you kind of snap it, different areas of the screen to make kind of like pseudo screens. And it's super nice. It also allows the ability to blow something up huge if you need to, like a map or something like that. And we've tried these in our system operations. It worked really, really well. We went from 6 monitors to 2 of these. And one kind of byproduct of that is cable management. You're going from 6 HDMI cables, 6 power cables to 2 cables and 2 HDMI and 2 power cables. So huge difference in that. A lot easier to, kind of organize and make things look tidy. We tried these. We kind of went on, and to my story earlier, someone saw a 43 and someone's like, I need one of those. So GIS got a few, then we got a few in IT. We've got a few kind of scattered out and about. But I mean, you made a really great point earlier, and I think it's something we need to reiterate is a little bit of extra money to help someone be more productive is going to pay off in probably like a month. I mean, people, they make a good, pay is good nowadays. Like, doesn't take long to use up $500 in productivity. So don't shortchange your users. If you can give them a dual monitor or a larger monitor like this, and that can help them, do something even 30 minutes faster a week, you're going to make up that cost so much, so quickly. They have a smaller version too. If you're dead set on a smaller one, they have 24 inch, and I think they actually might have a 27 as well. So pretty cool new thing. I think one was released in 2023. Looks like they've got the 24 was released in 2024. And then I think the 27 in 2025. So it's something that's, you might be able to, find a replacement for your D6000 there.
Yeah, yeah, Tanner told me about this before, and matter of fact, Devin on the last episode, he was testament to them as well. And the thing that really had me interested in we've got several scenarios where we have a dual monitor KVM. I don't know why, but and this goes back, well over a decade ago, but I have yet to see a dual monitor KVM work well. And it doesn't matter if you get a $200 one or a $1,500 one, they all have issues. And so we've got a few scenarios where we're going to try this out. And I mean, typically those dual monitor KVMs are not cheap. So we're interested, and Tanner warned me about this, but we issued one out to Stacy, our information technology business analyst, business systems analyst, and 2 days later, we had a finance person walk in, they're like, "I need a monitor like Stacy has." So, anyways, that might be a battle to not be buying a bunch of those that we didn't have in the budget.
Yeah, you can use that budget for a little bit, but eventually they're gonna put a request in.
Yeah.
So if you haven't tried those, highly recommend those. They're about they're kind of like the cost of 3 monitors, basically. They cost about what 3 monitors cost. So if you have anyone that has 4 monitors, they're a lot cheaper. Um, monitors we typically just let run till they just die, unless we can't get like the same look in it. We don't want to give someone like a hodgepodge look. But other than that, but kind of to your point, if you can get a little better productivity, might be worth going ahead and swapping early. I've been trying a remarkable tablet. That's just something we haven't done this as a company, but I've been doing this kind of just individually. Basically, for those that really love making handwritten notes, and I'm kind of one of those guys that don't like to type notes. It allows you. It's kind of e-ink screen, has really good battery life, allows you to write notes, and then it'll OCR your notes into typed text if you want. Doesn't because it's e-ink. It doesn't matter how bright it is outside or what room you're in, or there's no glare, and it'll upload to OneDrive. So I've been trying that. You know, I'm a big proponent of no paper, but I don't like type notes. I'll take it back. I don't like typing notes. And with OneDrive, you can kind of put it in a folder and keep track of it and stay organized. Because that was the thing when I had handwritten notes in a notebook. I was never organized. I couldn't find my notes. So that's something I've been using a little bit as well.
I may have to try that out. I don't like typing notes, and that's because I can't type. I didn't touch a computer till I was probably like 19 or 20 years old, and I matter of fact, I was in, keyboarding class or whatever they called it during the time, and I remember thinking to myself, I probably said this out loud to people, I was like, "I'm never gonna need to type," and I dropped it, took shop, and anyways, one of the biggest mistakes in my life, so I still do I like to write notes, I may need to check that out.
Yeah, I'm kind of. I don't know if you've seen those videos of those guys that are setting like world records for typing speed, and they give them something, and they're like, I think it's like 120 words per minute. They like a normal, like really good typist. I look like an average person compared to those. Like they're if our average typist is those guys, then I'm the person like looking around the keyboard. So thankfully, I don't have to type full on huge documents every day for work, or I guess I'd either get better or get you know quit or something. But and the last thing I think we both are kind of talking about, and I think we're both kind of in our infancy, at least as kind of figuring out all the different use cases, at least, is drones. We purchased a couple new drones. And if you don't have any drones, I would say don't just buy a drone to buy a drone. Get a program, in your company first. Kind of figure out what you're going to do with them, who needs to get licensed commercially, those kinds of things. But man, the new drones are pretty impressive. They're really like a flying camera, and I mean, it's really. I mean, you think of like a flying camera. How many times would it be nice to put a camera just in this like one little spot and see this one particular area? We've been using them obviously through Helene with the storm damage. It was really handy, but even just like social media work, construction progress, there's a lot of other ways you can use a drone. So I know you guys have some drones as well, and I know you've been doing it longer than we have.
Yeah, I think right now we have the big one is the DJI Inspire 2, and honestly, it gets very little use. So those that are thinking they need to get, the Mac Daddy, the big ones, I would try like a step down from that before you go with something like that because we honestly just don't prefer to fly it. Um, we've got the Air 2S and we have the Mavic Enterprise 2, which is pretty dated at this point. We're gonna sell a couple of them and buy either the whatever the latest generation Mavic is or the Air 3S. Those things, the new ones, even the smaller ones, they just have so much better of a flight time, and then their cameras are so much better. Personally, I have an Air 3, and man, that thing is just so awesome, and, it really wasn't a whole lot of money. I think I got it used for, like, 900, like, a year ago, and, we don't really have a system in place per se, but we are heavy users of the drone, I think. So we're doing a lot of transmission upgrades, and we've done, like, some flights, like, before, during the process, while we got both poles up before they moved the line over, and then the finished product. It's good at communicating with our board. We do it for social media. We just had our all employee meeting. We've got a video of the whole company, and we do that every year. And then sometimes just like you need to go look at a transmission pole overhead, and just to be able to do that, if you got to outsource it, pay for it, that can be quite costly. And I just give kudos to Nick, one of our system administrators. He actually has his pilot license anyway, so he got licensed to fly a drone for our company. He's been doing a great job with that. I would definitely, if you're just starting out, I would look at probably a Maverick, or even the Air, like the latest Air 3S, just depending on what your budget is. I really wouldn't, at this point, recommend the larger ones. I mean, maybe if you're flying in something that's really high wind, but it's just easier to fly the small ones, and they're just, easy to transport as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I recently got my Part 1 to 7 as well, and, um, there's something to be said. Convenience can trump capability in a lot of ways. Having something that you always have with you that's easier to, transport to and from whatever place it is, it's gonna get used 3 times over what something that has more capability potentially, but is much more of a hassle to get it set up and working is gonna do. So those are kind of maybe a couple little tidbits there, just general kinds of things that I think a lot of people could put to good use. Anthony, any final thoughts on our hardware episode, new hardware, and then kind of our philosophy on our existing hardware?
Yeah, just keep an open mind, and if don't be afraid to change things. I know early on we're replacing laptops every 3 years, and we spend a little bit more money up front getting better laptops, but we have a better end user experience, and we're able to keep them a little bit longer without having issues. Don't be afraid to try new brands and stuff like that. Like the 43-inch monitor, that's one of those things where I would have never even thought about it, but, Tanner brought it up, and we're trying it in different scenarios and see what kinda use cases we have. There's just a lot of things to do, and just wanna mention the Toyota Sequoia is the best vehicle on the planet.
Maybe to you, but, uh, no, that is such a thing though. People did get I mean, I think that's good advice. Try something new, don't get entrenched in what you do. Don't completely go full bore into something. Don't buy 30 of something, but buy one, try it out. If it doesn't work out, gives you the ability to move on. Um, we appreciate all the listeners and all the people viewing us. We do the show for you, so we appreciate you listening. If you have any good ideas for us on an episode that you'd like us to, topic you'd like us to cover, feel free to shoot us an email at show@offthewirepodcast.com, or when we post to social media, or just reach out to us either on a post or just directly on social media. And we'd be happy to hear from you. We just did one about 5 episodes back, I think, on account hygiene that was listener suggested, and I think it was really well received. So you guys have some great ideas along with us as well. Just a reminder, our episodes are released every other Monday. And until next time, this is Off the Wire.
Thank you, everyone.